Hello and welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions. I'm Ron Mackenzie Lafergie. The Megalodon was an enormous aquatic carnivore from the Early Miocene era to the end of the Pliocene. It was a super predator that preyed on everything from whales to turtles, using its powerful jaws to bite through just about anything in the sea. But what if these enormous beasts didn't go extinct 2.6 million years ago, but remain to this day? Let's explore. What if Megalodons didn't go extinct? First of all, let's go over some quick facts about Megalodons so we're all on the same page. The name Megalodon comes from the Greek meaning big tooth, and with teeth over 6 inches in length, the name does not lie. The Megalodon looks something like a beefed up great white shark, which is part of why some scientists believe them to be closely related. Reaching roughly 60 feet or 18 meters in length, this beast would be among the largest in the ocean, even longer than a city bus. Due to its powerful jaws, it's able to bite with over 180 newtons of force, which is why it's believed that the Megalodon attacked its prey from the side, biting through its body into the vital organs, rather than attacking from beneath like a great white shark. This creature was built to hunt and was an extremely successful predator, preying mostly on large creatures like whales, seals, and giant turtles. But if these creatures were so incredibly fit for their surroundings, how did they end up going extinct? Let's look into it, since this could help us understand them and understand the necessary changes to the world in order for them to survive. Climate change certainly played a factor in its extinction. Not the man-made climate change we've seen in recent years, but the natural, much more gradual change that has been seen throughout the history of the Earth. Global cooling made it more difficult for them to survive in many climates. However, as the temperature changed, many migrated to more suitable areas. Thus, climate change had little direct effect on the extinction. However, this climate change had another effect that did lead to the extinction of the Megalodon. By the end of the Miocene, many of the species the Megalodon preyed on had gone extinct, and those that survived were more difficult to catch. The lack of food and competition with other super predators led to the extinction of the Megalodon. So if we're imagining a world where Megalodons didn't go extinct, we would need the food sources, particularly the mysticetes or baleen whales, to not go extinct either. This means that not only would our world have enormous sharks swimming around, but whales would be more diverse and abundant as well. This in turn would mean that smaller fish and krill would have to be more abundant to feed the whales, which in turn would feed the Megalodon. But that's not all. The increase in mysticetes would mean that the other species of super predators could also survive. This means that we wouldn't only have to worry about the Megalodon, but other large creatures as well. All this is to say that the addition of the Megalodon would make waves in the ocean's ecosystems. Pun very much intended. But there's another rather pressing question to answer. How would this affect us? Well, if we're looking at how early humans would interact with Megalodons, we could look at the video game Ark. If you play Ark, you'll know that these pesky prehistoric sharks love to strand low-level players on islands. There's nothing more frustrating than swimming to an island only to find yourself surrounded by Megalodons. And this is something that could well have been an issue in the early days of humanity. Since Megalodons tended to reside off the coast, even a trip on a raft or small boat could lead to an attack. However, there were already large, dangerous creatures in the ocean at that time, and the addition of another likely wouldn't have huge effects on humanity's travel across the ocean. Nowadays, the existence of Megalodons wouldn't have a huge effect on humanity as a whole. It would certainly be interesting, albeit terrifying, to see a living one, but we have progressed to the point where we don't really depend on seafaring on small vessels. Perhaps there would be the odd story of a Megalodon attack off the coast, which would of course make the headlines, but the actual odds of this happening would be rather slim. And now we return to our question, what if Megalodons didn't go extinct? Well, if the Megalodon was to survive, sea life would likely need to be more diverse and abundant in order to feed all members of the ecosystem. In terms of its impacts on humanity, it might have been quite terrifying in man's early days, but modern humans likely wouldn't have much trouble with it. That said, I don't know about you, but I might think twice about going into the water knowing there could be a bus with teeth waiting for me.
If you've been a fan of the channel for a few years, you know we've done a handful of videos on the Megalodon. We've done a video in the past titled, What if Megalodon Sharks Didn't Go Extinct? We've also done a handful of videos pitting the Megalodon against both real and fictional creatures, such as the Mosasaurus and the OPC monster from Star Wars. So in today's video, I'm going to focus more so on the fact that if the Megalodon existed today, that means it would have found a way to live through some historical events. Of course, we'd also have to talk about how other ecosystems would possibly be affected over the years. Another important factor here is that when speaking about historical beings of any kind, over the years as we continue to research, we're going to learn more, meaning it's quite possible some of the information and stats covered in some of our previous videos regarding the Megalodon may no longer be valid due to the fact that after posting our original video, the community tasked with understanding the Megalodon discovered even more. We'll be asking, what if Megalodon existed today? What's going on, guys? Welcome back to LBQ. I'm your host for this one, Jared Bronstein, and today we're talking about one of the all-time greats, the Megalodon. Let us know your thoughts on this one below, and feel free to stick around for some comment replies. The Megalodon is believed to have been on average 34 feet in length. However, some researchers believe they may have reached anywhere from 60 to 80 feet. They are also believed to have weighed anywhere between 50 and 70 tons, which is equivalent to 100 to 140,000 pounds. Aside from being an absolute monstrosity, the Meg also had 276 jagged teeth, similar to that of a white shark. Now, when it comes to the strength of their bites, it's believed the Megalodon had a bite ranging from 108,000 to about 182,000 newtons. Humans have a bite force somewhere around 1,317 newtons. So think about the strength of an average human's bite and multiply that by over 100. There's nothing this thing wouldn't be able to break with its teeth. So to no surprise, between its size and sheer power, they were known to eat anything and everything, but mainly ate large mammals. So to no surprise, between its size and sheer power, they were known to eat anything and everything under the sun. This includes whales, dolphins, sea lions, sea turtles, and large fish, to name a few. They're believed to be a distant relative of the great white shark, but as you can clearly see, the Megalodon would be much bigger. It's been widely agreed upon that they went extinct about 3.6 million years ago due to a lack of food supply, likely from colder water temperatures. But what if somehow, some way, the Megalodon was able to adapt to these cooler waters? We've only discovered 5% of our oceans, which leads me to believe that there is a possibility that the Megalodon does exist somewhere out there in our world. Although it's extremely unlikely, as experts point out, they wouldn't be able to survive the colder temperature waters, meaning if one did exist, we would have seen it by now. But how do we know they don't exist? Maybe I'm just a dreamer and the thought of an 80-foot shark still roaming the deep ocean is all too exciting to pass up, but considering how there is a good 95% of the ocean unexplored, who's to say for sure? This also raises an interesting point. Maybe somehow, some way, the sharks were able to adapt to the cooler waters, which led to them reducing in size as a whole. Over the millions of years, it's quite possible the Megalodon found a way to adapt by living in cooler temperatures, which in turn reduced the shark's physical size and appetite. Now, I'm not saying this is definitely the case. In fact, it's likely not, but still, it's fun to ponder the thought. And if this was deemed to be true, it would lead to a lot of other questions and would certainly lead to a lot of research being conducted. If somehow sharks from millions of years ago were able to completely adapt to change from their natural habitats and physically change in size to accommodate their current living conditions, who knows what other deep sea creatures from millions of years ago still exist? Again, that's not to say they would necessarily be the same size. For the Megs to live in cold waters, they would not only likely reduce in size, but would also rely even more heavily on their sense of smell to capture prey. Given how dark the deep ocean is, marine life needs to either light it up naturally or use their heightened sense of smell or sight to maneuver. In the case of the Megalodon, much like great whites, they would rely on their sense of smell to capture prey. Historically, the newborns would tend to swim near the shore, which would obviously not be possible if they managed to become deep-sea creatures. Again, if somehow they managed, we'd have to review everything we thought we knew about the Megalodon. However, upon us learning that the Megalodon never went extinct, it doesn't seem the ecosystem would change all that much, because it would be the same as before we knew they existed. Nothing would change upon our realization, at least from a nature standpoint. At least at first. Upon this new discovery, as previously mentioned, we'd want to learn more about them, but sometimes nature is better left untouched, and there is a possibility our research leads to 60-foot Megalodons returning to warmer, more shallow waters. It may sound like a storyline for a Hollywood feature film that barely makes back its budget, but considering how we're already rolling with the idea that Megalodons never went extinct in the first place, it seems the possibilities are endless. Now, assuming that over the millions of years we thought they went extinct, they were really adapting to a life in the deep sea, it's not so far-fetched to think they could go back to their natural roots of thriving in the more shallow, warmer temperatures. And upon us discovering them in the deep sea and capturing them for research, their habitats would be disrupted. They would likely be aggressive towards us, and even if they were a quarter of their original size, still an 8-foot deep-sea shark is pretty scary. Regardless of if we're talking about newborns, adults, or both, upon initially capturing, there's no doubt a struggle would ensue. Although they were believed to be independent creatures, if the species were to reduce in size significantly, it's more than likely they would also adapt a herd mentality. This means if we captured a few of the newfound deep-sea Megalodons, but not all of them, the ones that weren't captured could possibly pursue us or the ship itself. As the Megalodons get to more shallow waters, eventually the sharks stop their pursuit, but again, who's to say they don't stay in the more shallow waters and learn to thrive there? As I previously mentioned, if they manage to somehow go from warm to cold, they could easily go back to warm. This is where our problem really starts. If somehow Megalodons found their way to more shallow waters again, as we know, they would certainly become a problem for all marine life. Although this time around they would likely be much smaller, it wouldn't be long, maybe a few decades, before they increase in size significantly once again. With a surplus in food, the Megalodon would likely once again become the apex predator of all the waters. But it would be interesting to see how other marine life handles the not-so-new deep-sea shark. Would white sharks feast on smaller Megalodons? You bet. This potentially means the Megalodons may never reach their potential lengths, once believed to be up to 80 feet. However, with the warming of our waters and the rising temperature of Earth in general, it is quite possible the Megalodon eventually does find a way to continue growing in size and eventually becomes a threat to the great white shark. But before that would happen, there would certainly be a shift in marine life in general. Assuming the Megalodon's new size, first coming from the deep sea, would be about 8 feet, it would likely be going after smaller fish or younger Megalodons or other sharks. However, this means they would also be prey for anything larger, which includes other sharks and whales as well. There's no way of really knowing for sure what would happen if this was the case, as nature always does seem to find a way. It is quite possible somehow, some way the Megalodon does grow in size, and we eventually have 60 or possibly even 80-foot sharks roaming our waters. A very scary thought to think about, but the reality is, even if they did exist, I don't think we'd have to worry about them eating any fishing boats.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Considering their size, the Megalodons would likely enjoy staying deep in the ocean. Of course, not the deep sea, but nowhere near where people would be swimming. However, when it comes to marine life, there would certainly be a decline in all kinds of fish and seafood, as the Megalodons were simply the kind of beasts that could open their mouth and devour a market full of fish in one sitting. Some of their jaws were believed to be 9 feet tall and 11 feet wide, so if that gives you any indication as to how much surface area an open Megalodon's mouth covers, you can see why there would be a drastic decline in all marine life. And as previously mentioned, although extremely unlikely, there are some who believe the Megalodon does still exist somewhere out there. Maybe my deep sea theory isn't so crazy after all. Survival is all about adapting, and if somehow, someway the Megalodon was able to adapt, well, that is one big shark I certainly don't want to cross paths with. It also gets you thinking, what else could possibly be out there? Interesting.
Have you ever wondered what would happen if a gigantic snake fought a gigantic shark? Well, we have. Are you really that surprised? Today, Life's Biggest Questions asks, what if a Megalodon shark fought a Titanoboa snake? Hello and welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions, the channel that imagines the impossible. I'm your host, Charlotte Dobre, and if you enjoy our videos, show us some love by smashing the thumbs up, subscribe, and notification bell. And if you haven't watched our videos on the Megalodon shark or the Titanoboa snake, we highly recommend you do so. So who do you think would win in a fight? Make sure you tell us in the comments below. The Megalodon shark is an extinct species of shark that lived between 23 to 2.6 million years ago. Titanoboa is an extinct species of snake that lived during the middle to late Paleocene epoch that lasted from 66 to 56 million years ago. But what if these two gigantic killing machines happened to live during the same time period, managed to cross paths, and got into an epic battle to the death? Which would win? Let's start with what we know about the Megalodon shark. Firstly, the Megalodon resembled a gigantic great white shark, probably because experts believe they are closely related. It could grow to be up to 82 feet from nose to tail and weighed up to 60 tons. It had a colossal jaw with huge teeth that were 7 inches long and a powerful bite. It could swim at a speed of up to 13.4 miles per hour, and experts believed it attacked its prey from the side, rather than from below like a great white shark. Next up, let's talk about Titanoboa. Titanoboa was gigantic as well. It was the biggest snake to ever have existed. It could grow to be 42 feet long and weighed just over a ton. Titanoboa was a powerful swimmer. It snacked on giant turtles and crocodiles and killed its prey by asphyxiation, like boa constrictors, where it would wrap itself around a victim and squeeze it until it died, either by suffocation or cardiac arrest. Titanoboa spent most of its time in the water. It swam in tropical waters, and if it had existed at the same time as the Megalodon, the two could have theoretically crossed paths. Well, maybe not, but let's not get into technicalities because this is Life's Biggest Questions after all. Would Titanoboa have been able to take on one of the biggest, deadliest predators in the history of the world? Let's get into it. In order for Titanoboa to stand a fighting chance against a Megalodon shark, it would have had to get a devastating bite in, as well as find a way to wrap itself around it. Titanoboa managed to snack on gigantic crocodiles, so why couldn't it snack on a gigantic shark? That being said, Megalodon sharks were immensely huge. They were powerful swimmers and had a streamlined body that could perhaps escape Titanoboa's grip. All it would have to do is thrash around violently and slip through Titanoboa's coils. Titanoboa's weakness in this fight would be its length. As I previously said, Megalodon sharks attack from the side. Snakes are rather long creatures last time I checked, and their bodies are essentially helpless. If a Megalodon shark happened to come across a Titanoboa snake, all it would have to do is dish out a devastating bite to a central area on its body, slicing through internal organs. And considering how big Megalodon's mouth was, it could probably slice Titanoboa clean in half with its 7-inch long teeth. Titanoboas were 3 feet thick at the thickest part of their bodies. Megalodon's mouth was up to 6 feet across, which means the Titanoboa's body could have comfortably fit inside Megalodon's mouth, and there would be still plenty of room for chomp. So there you have it. The winner of this fight would undoubtedly be the Megalodon shark. Do you agree with me or do you not? Write your responses in the comments.
3.5 million years ago,
one of the most dangerous creatures to ever live in the ocean went extinct. And I couldn't be more thrilled about it because this thing is f***ing terrifying. What? Welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions, guys. I'm your host, Taylor McWaters, and today we're taking a look at one of the most insane creatures to ever exist. Some people actually still believe that this shark still exists. They're making movies about it, there's sightings, they're finding teeth all over the world. What the f*** is up with the Megalodon shark? Let's dive in. We go back to the first time we discovered the Megalodon, and by we, I mean this man. Louis Agassiz discovered the Megalodon shark for the first time way back in 1843. He was a Swiss-born American naturalist and geologist. He actually achieved wonders with his discoveries on glacier activity and extinct fish. This man was a hustler. So one of those fish being the Megalodon, aka the tooth shark. So Louis actually named the shark himself, and yes, it does sound pretty badass on one hand, but on the other, it has meaning to it as well. It is also referred to as the Carcocles Megalodon, which in Greek means famed for jaggedness. Famous for being an absolute unit. It's like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson if he was a shark, basically. It's also referred to as the Otodus Megalodon, which in Greek translates to big tooth. It means big tooth. Just a big old tooth, great. Two features you want in something swimming below you in the ocean. Lovely, nothing more comforting. It's Louis's birthday this Friday actually, so you better pour one out for him. Or hit that like button. He told me that he likes it when people hit like buttons on his stuff as well. The ghost of him told me. His name choice was pretty accurate. I mean, look at the size of one of these things' teeth. You could scrape ice off your windshield with that. So Megalodon lived everywhere in the world but Antarctica. I mean, it of course favored the warm waters, but thanks to its size, Megalodon is like our great white sharks today. Partially warm-blooded thanks to the heat that they generate while swimming. Hot or cold, this thing is coming for you. It's coming to bite your toes or just eat you whole. Now, it's kind of hard to imagine how big these things really are, like when you actually think about it. But you get an idea when you see the size of one of their teeth alone. It has the largest teeth of any shark species ever known, obviously, and it comes in at around 5 inches on average. On average, the tooth is 5 inches long. The largest ever found was in South Carolina by a man named Vito Bartucci. Poor guy, he probably discovered the fossil and was like, we're screwed. We are absolutely screwed. This is evidence that we're all fucked. The largest tooth ever recorded was 7 inches. They've been found throughout our history many times before though. Also, one predicament is actually pretty hilarious, I'm not gonna lie. So Pliny the Elder, sometime around 70 AD, so a long time ago, it was recorded that they thought Megalodon teeth were triangular objects dropped from the sky during a lunar eclipse. That's how unbelievable this thing was as a tooth. They thought it was from the moon. They thought part of the moon fell off and hit the ground. They thought it was a piece of the moon like in Majora's Mask. Even in that game, there was also a Megalodon boss, a giant ass fish that was so scary. So if we're talking about the size of the tooth, you're probably dying to know how big the rest of its body was. The largest recorded Megalodon came in at 59 feet long. And we know that by studying the tooth because, well, obviously sharks don't have bones. They're just cartilage. They're just massive earlobes swimming around. Earlobes with teeth swimming around. That's a nice way to think about sharks. If you're having a hard time understanding how big that really is, like picturing in your head, picture a bowling alley because they're about 59 feet long as well. A bowling alley. So next time when you're waiting for the ball to hit the pins, just think to yourself while you're waiting there, shark, shark, shark. This is how long a shark once was. This is how long a shark, nice. That's massive, 59 feet. The Megalodon had to eat a lot of food. It was an apex predator. It ate whales, dolphins, seals, cars, probably, you name it. A lot of people consider this a dinosaur, and rightfully so. But dinosaurs and megalodons never existed at the same time. Dinosaurs died about 66 million years ago, and megalodons were only around 23 million years ago. Huge gap. I love how I say only as if like, you know, all of eternity ago wasn't that long ago. It wasn't an asteroid that took them out, it was changing ocean currents, and the fact that it had to eat 2,500 pounds of fish a day sure didn't help. And it had to go fin to fin with killer whales and great whites. And when they used their size and body warmth to try and evade these other beasts, they went to the Arctic waters, but whale migration met them there eventually. So Hollywood spent $130 million to show you how badass this thing would be if it were alive today. Didn't do too well with the reviews, but Jason Statham and Dwight from The Office were pretty good additions. It also reminded us that 100 million years ago when this thing first came to existence, it wasn't playing around. But the movie did remind us that when this thing did exist, it was probably really loud and scary. It didn't look like a great white shark either, despite how many of these monsters look in pop culture. We thought they were related for a while, but with recent studies, turns out they are not related at all.
You are not!
I can see the resemblance, that's for sure. Like this photo, for example. This is from the National Aquarium in Baltimore, and it's a reconstructed megalodon jaw with their mouth nearly 10 feet wide. Yeah, you can stand inside it for a photo. How fun. So where do we find these things? Is it common to find fossils of their teeth, or was that just a one-off? Well, between 2007 and 2009, numerous researchers have collected a number of megalodon teeth off the coast of Panama. A year ago, actually, a woman from South Carolina found a huge tooth coming in at around a 1 pound. A 1 pound. Apparently I'm Italian. Coming in at the 1 pound. She was super pumped about it as well. She posted the footage of the tooth, even offering advice saying that the Charleston area is great for finding more teeth. That's a pretty odd Facebook status to come across. Like if you don't know she's talking about sharks, that's a weird thing to scroll by and see. Hey guys, found some teeth off the shore. Great spot, bring some sunscreen, bring the kids. Gonna be a good day. Megalodon teeth have also been found in the UK near Essex, but the teeth there are found pretty rarely and the quality is often poor. Now, when we consider all these facts about the Meg and the fact that more than 80% of the ocean is still yet to be explored, we must end with the burning question: could the Megalodon still exist today? According to Emma Bernard, who curates the National History Museum fossil fish collection, she says no. She says in an interview that despite what Discovery Channel has said in the past, it's definitely not alive in the deep oceans. If an animal as big as Megalodon still lived in the ocean, we would know about it. That statement comforts me and also makes me kind of uneasy. But thanks for clearing it up, Emma. Besides, do you know how much garbage this thing would eat if it still existed today? Like, it needs to eat 2,500 pounds a day to survive. It would do one lap around Camilo Beach in Hawaii and just be dead instantly. Like, we literally have a beach made of plastic, and you're thinking that this thing would be alive? No, no chance. Because humans are terrible. All humans except for you, because you stuck around and watched this video.
The Megalodon, the biggest and greatest shark that ever swam in the oceans of planet Earth. The Leviathan, a prehistoric whale of epic proportions. What if the pair came to blows? One thing's for sure, there'd be an almighty rumble in the ocean. Hello and welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions, the channel that looks to answer a breadth of queries, be it from science, politics, pop culture, and simulated historical scenarios. We believe that no question is too silly, and today we're asking, what if the Megalodon shark fought the Leviathan? Before we jump into this video, why don't you let me know what team you're on? Are you team shark or are you team whale? I look forward to reading the comments in the comment section down below. Also, while you're there, don't forget to leave a good old thumbs up on this video. So, the Megalodon is an extinct species of huge shark that swam its last 2.6 million years ago. Its name, by the way, translates to big tooth and, well, have a look at a model of its jaw. Hello there, big teeth! By analysing fossils, it is thought that the Megalodon was 50 feet long and 50 tons in weight, so 50,000 kilos. The Megalodon is thought to be an uber version of its smaller living relative, the great white shark. The Leviathan went extinct about 5 million years ago and was a right old whopper of a sperm whale, measuring up to 57 feet long and weighing up to 57 tons. This ocean liner of a mammal had the largest teeth of any predator ever known to live. Already, we're noticing the Leviathan has the slight edge when it comes to size. Both predators are big, but the whale was thought to be bigger. Of course, it isn't all about size. How does old big-toothed shark measure up against massive Nasher whale? It seems that while the Megalodon had the most powerful and forceful bite of all time, the Leviathan's teeth were thought to be a foot long, which is insane. The Leviathan may have been bigger and bitier than the Megalodon, but it was less streamlined and less nimble. Depending on the circumstances of an attack, the Megalodon could have taken vast chunks of the Leviathan before it had a chance to attack in retaliation. The shark was also thought to have a pretty solid attack strategy, biting off its prey's fins and incapacitating it. Again though, this is circumstantial and relies on the Megalodon getting the first bite in. If the Leviathan had attacked first, it could take a bigger chomp out of old Sharky. Also, whales are known to have some of the biggest brains in the world. The Leviathan was no exception, and he was brainy. While the Leviathan was a good problem solver, the Megalodon was more primitive and maybe might not have been the smartest fighter, meaning it couldn't outthink the Leviathan, which would be a big issue for its survival if they did ever fight. Both the Megalodon and the Leviathan preyed on large animals. It seems so far like the Leviathan should be the winner, although it is worth mentioning that the impressive whale enjoyed less years swimming in the ocean, living between 1 to 5 million years, while the Megalodon lived for 20 million years, which in some ways makes it a victor. Their oceanic years did overlap towards the end of their lives, but we don't know for a fact if the pair ever came to blows. It is quite possible, given their sizes, they would have avoided one another save for a few passing glares. One fun thing to mention, while Leviathan is the name given to the prehistoric sperm whale, it was actually named after a sea monster mentioned in the Hebrew Bible and present in Jewish lore. The Leviathan is a ferocious sea monster, said to be a gigantic queen of the sea, conquerable only by gods. If it was this Leviathan versus the Megalodon, there would be no contest. Lady Sea Dragon would eat Sharky as a snack for afternoon tea. In reality though, if the Megalodon and the prehistoric whale did fight, it would depend on who struck first and what their motivation was to pick a winner. I would say the Leviathan has the edge though. If they did end up fighting, all other sea creatures may want to get out of the way for fear of total carnage. So that is all we have for this episode. Who do you guys think would win in a battle between the Megalodon and the Leviathan? Let me know if you're Team Shark or Team Whale in the comments section down below.
Hello friends and welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions. I'm your host Jared Bronstein, and today we have quite a battle on our hands. We'll be answering the question, what if the Megalodon fought the terrible Dogfish? Before we do explore this crazy idea, make sure to subscribe, click that bell icon, and of course, let us know in the comments down below who you think would win in a fight between these two rulers of the sea. So before we start depicting the battle of the century, we need to do a little explanation of our two opponents for those who don't know exactly what they are. Starting with the Megalodon, a massive shark that is now extinct, the Megalodon is believed to have been on average around 34 feet in length. However, some may have reached around 60 feet. They are also believed to have weighed anywhere between 50 and 70 tons, which is equivalent to 100 to 140,000 pounds. So these things were big. They were believed to have approximately 276 jagged teeth, similar to that of a great white shark, and quite powerful jaws as well. Humans have a bite force somewhere around 1,317 newtons, and it's believed the Megalodon had a bite range ranging from 108,000 to about 182,000 newtons. So if that gives you any idea as to how vicious these things really were, there isn't much that would stand a chance. But then there's the terrible Dogfish, a fictional creature from the story of Pinocchio. The terrible Dogfish was described as a beast sitting at around 3,300 feet and about 5 stories tall. It also had 3 rows of razor-sharp teeth and most likely wouldn't use its teeth all that much. Considering its size, it would probably just swallow things whole. So if we had the Megalodon face off against the terrible Dogfish, you'd most likely think, well, it wouldn't be much of a fight. The terrible Dogfish would just swallow the Megalodon whole and that's the end of it. But it doesn't seem to be that simple. When the terrible Dogfish swallows Pinocchio and his father, they didn't die. And they escaped because the terrible Dogfish sleeps with its mouth open, above the water. So clearly the terrible Dogfish doesn't have stomach acids to break down whatever it's eating, which is why the battle between these two is so interesting. At first, yes, the terrible Dogfish would be able to swallow the Megalodon whole, but the Megalodon would technically be able to attack the terrible Dogfish from the inside out. That would not only be painful, but extremely problematic for the terrible Dogfish. We also need to consider that the terrible Dogfish is the only of its kind, whereas the Megalodon was a species with who knows how many of its kind roaming the waters. Although there is a significant size difference, unless the Megalodon were to be chewed by the terrible Dogfish, it may end up winning the battle between these two. Now going back to the idea of it literally eating its way out of the terrible Dogfish's stomach, assuming it bleeds like any living being, that would in turn attract more predators, specifically sharks. So now the fight would go from Megalodon versus the terrible Dogfish to terrible Dogfish versus Megalodon and any other sharks that have now been attracted to this scent of blood, which may very well include other Megalodons. As you can surely see which direction we're going in here, although the terrible Dogfish is hundreds of times, if not thousands of times bigger than the Megalodon, it may not be victorious in a battle between the two. However, there is also another way this fight can go. The terrible Dogfish does bite down on the Megalodon and quite literally shreds it into pieces. Again, the blood may attract other predators, but they wouldn't necessarily attack the terrible dogfish. Instead, they'd be going after the injured or most likely dead Megalodon's corpse for a feast. As you can see, the entirety of the battle depends on a handful of things. Who would be the first to initiate the fight? Would they go at each other head on? And would the terrible dogfish swallow the Megalodon whole, or take a bite out of it, most likely instantly killing it? If the Megalodon were to be swallowed whole, which is the more likely scenario, given the massive size difference, it's quite possible the Megalodon could do damage to the terrible dogfish's insides as well. Instead of chewing through the terrible dogfish, it's possible the Megalodon could eat its heart out. Or maybe its brain. We can't forget the terrible dogfish is 5 stories in height and over 3,000 feet long. Even for a 60-foot, 100,000-pound shark, that's a lot of space to swim around. Who knows where the Megalodon would end up if swallowed whole? Maybe it would attack other fish, or possibly even fishermen who also fell victim to the terrible dogfish. Unfortunately, there is no way of knowing how this battle really would pan out, and that's because not only is the Megalodon extinct, but the terrible dogfish is completely fictional. There is, of course, the dogfish, which are incredibly small sharks. We're talking maybe 2 to 4 feet in length. Now, they really wouldn't be much of a snack for the Megalodon because of their incredible sizes. However, a 3,300 foot in length whale of sorts in the terrible dogfish, well, that could feed an entire ocean. Alright, maybe not the entire ocean, but you get what I'm saying. It'd be a feast for many species to say the least. There's also the possibility that other species actually team up with the Megalodon to take down the terrible dogfish. Assuming the terrible dogfish is the top predator in the ocean or the waters, if there was an opportunity for other species to gang up and take down what they fear the most, it would only seem to make sense. But then, that may lead to the Megalodon becoming the top predator, but I mean, hey, what's worse? A 3,300 foot long whale with 3 rows of razor sharp teeth, or a 100,000 pound plus 60 foot long shark roaming the waters? Truthfully, they both sound awful, but I'd take the latter any day of the week. Now, as previously mentioned, we'll never know for sure how this fight would end if it were to actually happen. The Megalodon went extinct millions of years ago, and the terrible dogfish never existed in the first place. So if we want to be logical here, guys, the Megalodon would always win, but that isn't a fun way of looking at things. So instead, we decided to actually look at a few different angles here. Now I want to hear from you guys. If these two monsters, because let's be real, that's what they are, fought each other, who do you think would win? Let me know in the comments down below.
Megalodon, the toothiest of deadliest sharksters and the ruler of the prehistoric ocean. Slenderman, a modern-day creepypasta turned into a waking life creepathon. A tall, quiet, faceless killer that will haunt you in your sleep. One sea creature of doom, one woodland lurker of terror. But what if they faced off against one another? Hello and welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions, the channel that loves to answer the wackiest of looniest questions. Why? Well, if nobody ever asked, we'd never know the answer, would we? Before we jump on into this video, I want to ask you guys who you think would win in a face-off battle between Slenderman and the Megalodon. Write hashtag Team Slenderman or hashtag Team Megalodon in the comments section down below. Also, while you're down there, why don't you click on that thumbs up button and the notification bell so you never ever miss a big answer. If you guys ever want to find out more about a video, about our sources, and about the creative team here at Life's Biggest Questions, there are links in the description boxes. Right then, Slenderman versus Megalodon. Fight! This is interesting because we have a prehistoric animal that swam its last 2.6 million years ago and a creature of urban legend that emerged in 2009 and hit dizzying heights of internet in the 2010s. The Megalodon's day is very much over, yet Slenderman's has only just begun. Although he isn't real, but that's no fun, right? Let's just assume he is. Well, firstly, how do these two killers measure up? The Megalodon was said to be a relative of the much smaller but still living great white shark, only the Megalodon was like a jacked up uber version at 50 foot long and 50 tons, so that's over 50,000 kilos. Not to mention its giant teeth. But actually, let's mention those gnashes as they might be important and actually, they might help him win. The biggest Megalodon teeth found have been around 7 inches, and it is thought that the Megalodon had the most powerful bite in the animal kingdom. Slendy, on the other hand, may not have Megalodon-sized gnashes, but some depictions and creepypastas show him having a mouthful of pointy teeth and a terrifyingly long tongue. Like, get that away from me. Okay, but does he measure up to the shark? Well, short answer, no. The Megalodon was thought to weigh 50,000 kilos, guys. 50,000. I mean, mate, I don't care how spooky you are, that fish could quash you. Slenderman is, well, slender. Sure, he's thought to be tall, but at most he's described as being 15 feet tall, although usually he's described as being around 7 or 8 foot. I don't care what you say, even at top estimates of 15 feet, he was nowhere near as big as the Megalodon. Also, slender, so does he weigh 50,000 kilos? No, he doesn't. I'm thinking like 80 at best. All the shark need do is flop over him and he would be crushed, and that's without getting his jaws around him. Megalodon could munch old Slendy as an appetizer and amuse-bouche. Did I just want to say amuse-bouche today? Sure, but that doesn't defeat my point. It isn't over yet though. Slenderman does have a few tricks up his sleeve, and when I say a few tricks, I mean a few extra arms. Honey gets tentacly when he's mad, according to a number of artist impressions and creepypastas anyway. Perhaps with all those additional arms he would be able to hold the Megalodon down, but I don't know, perhaps they're all the better for chomping through. Slendy does have some kind of voodoo mind control thing going on. He is thought to appear in his victims' dreams and make them sick before he visits them in real life. This sickness is characterized by nausea, nosebleeds, nightmares, and hallucinations, which sounds like a rough time for Mr. Shark. Maybe Slenderman can get inside his head and that could be his key to victory. Just, really freak that shark out. Or maybe it would make the Megalodon an even more dangerous predator, crazed and ill. Yikes. Okay, but hold your slender horses. How is this fight even gonna go down? Slenderman is a woodland dweller and the Megalodon lives in the ocean. 2.6 million years ago. Where would these two would-be rivals ever meet? If on land, then old Sharky is done for, and if in the ocean, well, Slenderman, does he have gills? Can he breathe underwater? Do those tentacle arms mean that he's part octopus? Would this even up the fight? Despite Slenderman's Jedi mind tricks, octo arms, and general creepiness, we can't help but think that the Megalodon would crush him with sheer size and ferocity. However, there is one final string to his silent and somewhat more sentient bow. Slenderman has been known to take human proxies. If it were more than a case of man versus shark and the bringer of doom and gloom could enlist humans, then there's no doubt he could mastermind some kind of voyage to multi-harpoon the Megalodon. But even with a small army, could he really take it down? Isn't Slenderman's things little girls in the woods anyway? I guess there's a reason he hasn't tried to take down a lion or a grizzly bear. He likes to prey on the weak, and the Megalodon simply isn't that. I'm kind of wishing that the big bad killer fish did exist today, just so we could feed Slendermen to him and be done with that creep forever. But Slenderman isn't real, so whatever. If you're scared of Slenderman, why don't you just conjure up a giant killer shark in your mind and have him chomp, because obviously the Megalodon would win.